Good afternoon. It's April 21st, 2017. My name is Matthew Ogden, and I would like to welcome you to our Friday evening broadcast here from LaRouchePac.com. Now, we had a discussion with both Lyndon and Helga LaRouche just a few hours ago, and both of their emphasis was that our objective as the LaRouche Political Action Committee remains the same, a very clear objective, which is twofold. Number one, to free the United States from the attempts to use it by the British imperial system to bulldoze the world into World War III, a danger which is very, very real right now with the situation that is heating up in Syria after the ill-advised strike by the Trump administration on the Syrian government there based on very, very flawed intelligence, and the bellicose, aggressive escalation around the situation in North Korea. But on the other hand, to continue the campaign to bring the United States into the new paradigm which is emerging worldwide as we speak. Obviously, we are in the countdown towards the Belt and Road Initiative Conference, which is being held in Beijing in May in less than 3 weeks, being hosted by President Xi Jinping of China, but being attended by, I think now close to 28 different heads of state from around the world. Obviously, the campaign remains that President Donald Trump should attend this summit in person and should reciprocate President Xi Jinping's offer that the United States join the Belt and Road Initiative and become part of this new paradigm of economic development and peace versus the old dying paradigm of the British Empire's geopolitical divide and conquer strategy, which has brought the world to the brink of World War III. Now, the Chinese are in a drive now, have escalated their organizing campaign to organize the world towards this upcoming event. And it's a very significant fact that in the United States, increased attention is now being granted towards this in the wake of the Schiller Institute conference, which occurred last Thursday and Friday, April 13th and 14th in New York City, which was titled The United States and China Cooperation for the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, there's a few very significant quotes that we're going to play for you here. It starts off with a visit that the chairman of the Standing Committee of the Chinese National People's Congress, Zhang Dezhang, had when he traveled to Moscow to meet President Putin this past Wednesday to lay the groundwork for President Putin's visit to Beijing. He said, "Under President Xi Jinping's strategic leadership, our bilateral relations and comprehensive strategic partnership has reached a very high point. China looks forward to and welcomes your visit in May of this year to attend the One Belt, One Road International Cooperation Forum. You will be the highest guest of honor there. You will meet with President Xi Jinping on the forum's sidelines, and this has great significance for bolstering the friendship and cooperation between our countries and promoting bilateral cooperation in all areas, particularly in today's situation." Now, Zhang's visit to Moscow is part of a broader Chinese organizing drive for the Belt and Road Summit, which also included remarks by President Xi Jinping during a tour of South China's Guangxi-Zhuang Autonomous Region this past Wednesday. He said, "The Belt and Road Initiative has been widely recognized in international society since it was put forward, which shows that it accords with the will of the people. We will promote China's great opening up and development under the Belt and Road framework and further promote the realization of the two centenary goals and the Chinese dream of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation." Now, together with this, there's been a press conference which was sponsored by the Transportation Ministry of China, and the spokesman stated that transportation connectivity is the founding priority of the implementation of the Belt and Road Initiative. This press conference was hosted by the Transportation Ministry in order to highlight the growing scope of the Belt and Road projects. The Transportation Ministry spokesman stated that more than 130 bilateral and regional transport agreements have already been signed. 56 international road routes have been opened. He said that 4,200 direct flights now connect China with 43 different Belt and Road Initiative countries. And finally, and most significantly, 39 China-Europe freight train routes are now currently in operation. So this is clearly highlighting the extraordinary scope and growing magnitude of the Belt and Road Initiative as the paradigm which is sweeping the planet. And also, just this past Wednesday, Xinhua.net published an interview with the president of Greece, where he said, the upcoming high-level forum on the Belt and Road Initiative is of global significance. The forum is important not only to China, but also to the rest of the world. The forum will prove that in the new historical era, China will play an important role in promoting the harmonious coexistence of countries in the world. Now, this theme of the harmonious coexistence of countries in the world is a theme that the Chinese president and the Chinese government has highlighted on multiple occasions, comparing the Silk Road Initiative to a kind of symphony orchestra, where not one voice is more prominent than another, but the voices of all the instruments mixed together in one harmonious coexistence. That this is a metaphor for the new paradigm, not a unilateral world where one country or one bloc's values and system are imposed on another country, but that the best of what every country has to offer is brought to the table in dialogue, both culturally, economically, strategically, and that the new paradigm is based on this kind of win-win cooperation. Now, this was a theme that Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder of the Schiller Institute, took up in multiple ways in both her keynote on the first day of the International Schiller Institute Conference, which I referenced up in New York City on U.S.-China cooperation, but also in a very beautiful way in her speech during the second day of that conference. We're not going to play the full speech for you here. It's available on the Schiller Institute website, but the theme that she brought up was a very, very beautiful theme of the cultural dialogue between the best of what Western European culture has to offer and the Confucian tradition in China. And she compared the writings of Friedrich Schiller, who is obviously the namesake of the Schiller Institute and one of the leading thinkers of revolutionary Europe at the time of the American Revolution. He was named the poet of freedom. Compared to the writings of the thousands-year-old philosopher of Chinese civilization, the philosopher Confucius. And both of these two philosophers' writings converge on the idea that it's the aesthetical education and the aesthetical development of the citizens of the country which allows for peace and prosperity to become the reigning order of that nation or of that land. And she read several extensive quotes from Confucius, in which he developed the idea that the music reflects and reciprocally reflects back on the state of development of the mind of the people. And an organized and developed form of music reflects an organized and developed form of society. And she compared this to the writings that Friedrich Schiller had in his writings on the aesthetical education of man, which he published in the wake of the failed French Revolution. And he elaborated, Friedrich Schiller, that a republican form of government must make as its number one priority the aesthetical development of its people. Now, she said that it's not a surprise for a country such as China, where President Xi Jinping has made a premium, put a premium on the revival of this Confucian idea. She said that there's a renaissance of Confucian ideas and Confucian philosophy that is now taking place inside China, that this metaphor of a symphony orchestra or of a chorus of voices joining together should be one that the president of China uses in his discussion of what this new international paradigm of win-win, mutually beneficial relationships between countries should be. And that this is what is now organizing the world as an almost gravitational force towards this upcoming Belt and Road Initiative conference that's going to be hosted in Beijing by China in May. Now, obviously, many countries around the world are now realizing what time it is, that in fact China is emerging as the world's leading economic power and economic leader, and is bringing that kind of development perspective that it's already applied domestically for its own people to countries around the world. Former colonial countries in Africa, building trains, building water projects there, bringing this as part of a dialogue in South America for canal projects and rail projects there, and obviously along the entire Belt and Road Initiative corridor. What is happening is that many countries are now saying, well, we're on board. The latest is Belarus, to say President Lukashenko there is saying that Belarus is going to become a hub of the One Belt and One Road Initiative inside Europe. Helga Zepp-LaRouche joked that Germany is now being surrounded by countries that wish to become a part of the new Silk Road. And whereas those countries are a hub of development, Germany is a whole of development right now. But you have also the announcement in recent weeks that many countries are now joining the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. This was an offer that President Xi Jinping directly put on the table during the APEC summit years ago in a joint press conference with President Barack Obama, and Obama rejected it. Xi Jinping offered that the United States could enter into the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank as one of its founding investors. Now, this obviously remains an offer which is open, and these offers have been reiterated in the recent weeks surrounding President Xi Jinping's trip to the United States during his bilateral summit meeting with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. And very significantly, this was reiterated during the LaRouche Movement's Schiller Institute conference in New York City by the Deputy Consul General representing the Chinese consulate in New York City. And we're going to play a very short clip from her speech, but it's very clear. She says, President Xi Jinping offers the United States to join China in cooperation in the Belt and Road Initiative framework. This is an opportunity that should be seized, and it's an opportunity which will be mutually beneficial to both countries involved. So here's that clip.
Last but not the least, I want to quote President Xi as saying that China welcomes the United States to participate in cooperation within the Belt and Road framework. President Xi stressed that both countries have become each other's first largest trading partners, and both peoples have benefited a lot from it. China's economy will maintain a sound development momentum, and the enhancement of economic and trade cooperation between the countries enjoys broad prospects. Both countries should really seize the opportunities.
Now, during that conference, it was obviously very significant that this representative of the Chinese government attended that conference, which was on the subject of U.S.-Chinese cooperation around the Belt and Road Initiative, and again, formally extended the offer to the United States and to President Trump to join this initiative and to cooperate with China around this new paradigm of economic development for the planet. And as that representative, the deputy consulate, stated during the rest of her speech, and as Helga Zepp-LaRouche reiterated, this upcoming May 13th, mid-May meeting of the Belt and Road Initiative that's being hosted in China is the opportunity. This is the inflection point for the United States to change its policy. Now, very provocatively at that conference, Helga Zepp-LaRouche began the entire conference with her keynote presentation saying that she has stated that if President Trump were to decide to join this new Silk Road and to join this new paradigm, he could become one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States. And she said that shocked a lot of people when she said that several weeks ago. And despite the fact that a very ill-advised action was taken by President Trump to enter into this confrontational stance with North Korea, and also to take the initiative to bomb the Syrian air base in Syria, she said that statement still stands. That characterization still stands, because if he were to make that choice, that would mean that he was deciding to abandon the British geopolitics of unilateral imperial war and confrontation, and to become part of this new paradigm, which would mean an end to the British imperial system once and for all. Now, since that point, it's been very clear that the British Empire has been involved directly in trying to bulldoze Donald Trump into this kind of World War III confrontation and away from the kind of cooperation that was clearly part of his campaign. Now, at the same time that the Chinese representative at that conference in New York City made that statement, that formal offer once again for the United States to join the Silk Road, also in attendance was the charge d'affaires for the permanent mission of the Russian Federation to the United Nations. And he made a very significant point, which was similar. He said, the Russian people do not wish for confrontation with the United States of America, but wish instead for bilateral cooperation, a relationship of friendship, of mutual understanding and mutual development, and that this is in fact this is the opportunity which is posed by the types of initiatives that were being discussed at that conference in New York City, this Schiller Institute Belt and Road Initiative conference. Now, unfortunately, as we've documented and as we continue to document, the Trump administration has taken has been taken in by the kind of false propaganda drumbeat that is now being propagated from many of the leading media organizations in the United States, and very profoundly from the British government, from Boris Johnson, from the military layers inside Great Britain, and so forth. However, since the time that President Trump made the decision to launch the airstrikes against the Syrian government, based on the supposed intelligence that Assad had used chemical weapons against his own people, increasingly there's been evidence that has been coming out from very credible sources that in fact that intelligence was flawed and was perhaps even faked as a false flag initiative in order to pull Trump into this war. Very similar to the type of lies that came out of Tony Blair in 2003 in order to pull the United States into the war against Iraq with the so-called weapons of mass destruction. Now, there was a very significant interview that was delivered by President Assad to Sputnik News just yesterday, which is now being circulated today. And we're going to read a few clips from that interview for you. What President Assad had to say in this interview, as you can see on the screen with Sputnik News, is that this was a false flag. He said, "We formally sent a letter to the United Nations asking in that letter to send a delegation in order to investigate what happened in Khan Shaykhun. Of course, till this moment, they didn't send anyone because the West and the United States blocked any delegation from coming. Because if they come, they will find out that all their narratives were a false flag. So for us, there was no gas attack and no gas depot. It was a false flag play just to justify the attack on Syria. That's what happened. The attack was already prepared. They didn't want to listen. They didn't want to investigate. They only wanted to launch the attack. We believe it was a false flag for one reason and a simple reason. If there was gas leakage or an attack, and you're talking about 60 dead in that city, how could the city continue its life normally? They didn't evacuate the city. Even if you look at the pictures, you can see the rescuers, the presumable rescuers, were rescuing people without masks, gloves. How could they were moving freely? How? This is against all specifications of sarin gas. You can fake this image. It's very easy, so you cannot just base your judgment on images and videos, especially made by Al-Qaeda. Now, this was also reiterated by the Russian Defense Ministry spokesman, General Igor Konashenko, on April 20th, in a similar argument where he points to the fraud that's being perpetrated. He said, quote, "In the past 2 weeks, not a single OPCW representative was seen there at the site of the supposed attack in Syria. Where do these samples come from that the OPCW claims prove that there was a sarin gas attack? Who of the OPCW members was able to study them so fast while standard procedures stipulate a complex research which requires time, as we can see in the case of the mustard gas use in Aleppo," unquote. Konashenko then ironically went after the, quote, "charlatans from the White Helmets organization who were hustling and bustling inside sarin gas clouds with no protective gear on. Although independent experts do not believe that anyone could have remained unharmed in a sarin gas attack, nevertheless, maybe the head of the OPCW," he said, "has created his own periodic table of the elements instead of Mendeleev's one," Konashenko stated, unquote. And then over the last few days, over the course of this week, a qualified source, a professor emeritus from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the former professor Ted Postal, released a series of very detailed exposés on the facts surrounding this Syrian sarin gas attack, which proves, according to him, that the White House intelligence assessment blaming the Syrian government is simply false. Professor Postal, who I said is a professor emeritus at MIT, received his PhD in nuclear engineering from MIT, and he's worked at the Argonne National Laboratory. He's worked in the Congressional Office of Technology Assessment. He's worked as a scientific advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations, and also at Stanford University to train scientists studying weapons technology. He stated in this expose about the alleged Syrian sarin gas attack, he said, first of all, the details of the location being cited, the weather patterns at the time, other factors, he said, conclude, quote, "Without a doubt, the sarin dispersal site alleged at the source of the April 4th, 2017 sarin attack in Khan Sheikhoun was not a nerve agent attack site. It also shows beyond a shadow of the doubt that the only mass casualty site that could have resulted from this mass attack is not in any way related to the sites that are shown in video following a poisoning event of some kind at Khan Sheikhoun." He continues by saying, quote, "The allegedly high-confidence White House intelligence assessment issued on April 11th that led to the conclusion that the Syrian government was responsible for the attack is not correct. For such a report to be so egregiously in error, it could not possibly have followed the most simple and proven intelligence methodologies to determine the veracity of its findings," unquote. So there you have from several different sources a qualified questioning of the facts of the attack on the ground. None of these obviously is conclusive one way or another, and as has been stated, a independent, non-biased United Nations investigation should take place, and OPCW personnel should be on the ground. But the point is, as was realized after the fact, the lies that came out of the British Empire and from Tony Blair in 2003, which brought the United States into a completely unjustified and aggressive war in Iraq, very well are being repeated at this point. There was a story earlier this week, which we will cover more extensively, that in fact the Chilcot Commission report, which found that Tony Blair was at fault in those lies that were perpetrated around the 2003 attack. A lawsuit has been brought against Tony Blair, but the UK Attorney General has determined that although aggressive warfare might be against the law in international law, might be illegal in international law, in fact, there are no laws on the books in the United Kingdom, inside England, that say that aggressive war is illegal, that aggressive war is a crime. So there you can see that, in fact, the British do not believe that the crime of aggressive war is actually one that should be prosecuted. Now, to conclude, there has been now an initiative this week from Executive Intelligence Review to begin producing a series of video shorts which expose the crimes of the British government at this point to try to steamroll the United States into this kind of World War III and to prevent the United States from participating in the kind of international cooperation that you see around the new Silk Road. And there's definitely a countdown, a showdown in these 21 days between now and this Belt and Road Initiative conference in China. And it should be seen as such, a fight for the soul of the United States. What direction will the U.S. go? What direction will the Trump administration go? And as the inaugural video in that short video series, Executive Intelligence Review published a 90-second clip from the conference presentation by Helga Zepp-LaRouche from last week in New York City, where she lays out very clearly that what is happening here in the United States is, in fact, a British intelligence coup against the Trump administration, and the point has got to be made. Americans should know their history and realize that over the course of our entire history, ever since the American Revolution, the British have been trying to reconquer the United States, to use the United States as its dumb giant in these wars in order to assert this imperial agenda, and that now is the time for the American people to recognize this history, to recognize what is happening, to know who the enemy actually is, and to say, we will no longer be a tool of this imperial system, and we are now deciding to become part of this new paradigm and to return to our roots. Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, Henry Carey, Henry Clay, and the American system of political economy that Donald Trump less than 3 weeks ago was talking about his model for economic policy in the United States. So I'm going to conclude with this short clip from Helga Zepp-LaRouche and encourage you to please tune in to this new video series that is coming from Executive Intelligence Review. It can be found on the EIR YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to. And we are also going to be sharing some of these via social media. So you can subscribe to these social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. So thank you very much, and let me conclude with this clip from Helga Zepp-LaRouche.
What happened is de facto a coup d'etat inside the United States, which has two elements. One is the false flag operation in Syria, combined with what one could call a palace coup inside the administration. Now, this coup is a British intelligence operation, and it must be recognized as such in order to liberate President Trump from this great danger. Remember that the American War of Independence, that which created the United States, was made against the British Empire. And the British Empire never gave up the idea to reconquer the United States. The first time they did that was in the War of 1812. Then the British Empire allied with the Confederacy. British banks financed the Confederacy in this war through their affiliates in Boston, in Philadelphia, and so forth. The British Empire totally got upset when Trump announced that he wants to go back to the American system of economy. Alexander Hamilton, Henry Clay, Lincoln.
Henry Clay believed in what he called the American system.
You just should reread what Henry C. Carey wrote about the difference of the British Empire economy, which makes people poor, and the American system of economy, which is concerned about the well-being of the labor force, raising the living standard. We need people to become conscious again about the American history.